My son kicked me out of the Christmas table and said, "My mother-in-law is going to sit here. Get out." Those 9 words destroyed our relationship in seconds. But what he didn't know was that by morning, I would take away everything he had. The house, the car, the job, the comfortable life he thought was his, all gone in less than 24 hours. And when he woke up the next day to 47 missed calls from banks and lawyers, he finally understood that disrespecting your mother comes with a price he could never afford to pay. I never thought my own son would tell me to get up from the Christmas dinner table so his mother-in-law could take my seat. But what happened that December 25th, 2024 changed everything between us forever. My name is Nicole Patterson. I'm 65 years old, and I've spent the last 40 years building a life I thought would keep my family together. I raised my son Christopher as a single mother after my husband died when Chris was just 8 years old. I worked 3 jobs to put him through college, sacrificed vacations and new clothes so he could have everything he needed. I thought we had an unbreakable bond. I thought wrong. That Christmas Eve, I drove to Christopher's house in Portland with my heart full of hope and my car full of presents for my grandchildren. The neighborhood looked like a postcard with snow covering the rooftops and colored lights twinkling on every porch. I could already smell the turkey roasting as I pulled into the driveway. Christopher's wife, Amanda, greeted me at the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She'd always been polite to me but never warm, like she was tolerating my presence rather than welcoming it. "Hi, Nicole, come on in," she said, taking my coat but not offering to help with the mountain of gifts I was carrying. I could hear my grandchildren, Emma and Jacob, playing upstairs, their laughter echoing through the 2-story house that I'd helped Christopher buy with a $50,000 down payment gift 3 years ago. I set the presents under the tree and looked around the living room, noticing something unusual. The dining table was set for 7 people instead of the usual 6. "Are we expecting someone else?" I asked casually. Amanda's face brightened in a way I'd never seen before. "Yes, my mother is joining us this year," she announced like it was the best news in the world. I felt a strange knot forming in my stomach but pushed it aside. Patricia Morrison, Amanda's mother, was a wealthy real estate developer who'd always looked down on me because I came from a working-class background. She'd made it clear at Christopher and Amanda's wedding that she thought her daughter had married beneath her station. Still, it was Christmas, and I was determined to make the best of it. When Patricia arrived an hour later, everything shifted. Christopher transformed into someone I barely recognized, rushing to take her coat and offering her the best seat by the fireplace. "Mrs. Morrison, it's so wonderful to have you here," Christopher said with a level of enthusiasm I hadn't heard in his voice in years. Not when I visited, not on my birthday, not even when I'd given them that down payment for this very house. Patricia settled into the armchair like a queen on her throne, her designer outfit and diamond jewelry making me suddenly conscious of my department store dress. But I smiled anyway because family is family, right? Or at least that's what I kept telling myself as I watched my son fawn over this woman who'd never shown me an ounce of respect. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife as we all gathered around the dinner table. I moved toward my usual seat, the chair at Christopher's right side where I'd sat for every holiday dinner since he and Amanda had bought this house. That chair represented something to me, a symbol of my place in my son's life, a connection to the family I'd worked so hard to build. But as I reached for the chair, Christopher's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. "Mom, not there," he said quietly, his eyes avoiding mine. I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. "What do you mean, honey? This is where I always sit," I said, trying to keep my voice light even though my heart was starting to pound. Amanda and Patricia were watching the scene unfold with expressions I couldn't quite read. My grandchildren had gone silent, sensing something was wrong the way kids always do when adults are about to have a confrontation. Christopher's grip on my wrist tightened slightly, and when he finally looked at me, his eyes were cold in a way that made my blood freeze. "My mother-in-law is going to sit here. Get out," he said with a firmness that felt like a slap across my face. The words hung in the air like poison gas, and I felt the entire room holding its breath. Get out. Like I was some stranger who'd wandered in off the street. Not the woman who'd raised him alone for 34 years. Not the mother who'd worked overnight shifts as a nurse so he could have braces and piano lessons and a college education without debt. Not the grandmother who drove 2 hours every weekend just to see Emma and Jacob and shower them with the love I'd never stopped giving. I stood there frozen, my hand still on the back of the chair that had been mine, trying to process what was happening. "Christopher, I don't understand," I whispered, my voice cracking despite my best efforts to stay composed. Patricia was already rising from her seat across the room, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of her mouth like she'd been expecting this moment. Amanda looked down at her plate, refusing to meet my eyes or come to my defense. And my son, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for, simply pointed toward a folding chair that had been set up at the far end of the table, away from the family. "You can sit there," Christopher said, gesturing to that cheap folding chair like he was doing me a favor by even allowing me at the table. The humiliation burned through my chest like acid, spreading through every nerve in my body until I thought I might actually be sick right there in front of everyone. But I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. I wasn't going to cry or beg or make a scene in front of my grandchildren who were watching with wide, confused eyes that broke my heart into a million pieces. So I walked to that folding chair with my head held high, even though my legs were shaking so badly I wasn't sure they'd carry me. I sat down on that uncomfortable metal seat while Patricia took my place at Christopher's side, settling in like she owned it. The dinner that followed was the longest 2 hours of my entire life. I watched as Christopher hung on Patricia's every word, laughing at her stories about luxury vacations and country club gossip. I watched as Amanda served her mother the best cuts of turkey and the largest portions of everything while barely acknowledging my presence. My grandchildren kept looking at me with questions in their eyes that I couldn't answer. Emma, who was 12 years old, kept opening her mouth like she wanted to say something, but Amanda would shoot her a warning glare that silenced her immediately. Jacob, only 9, actually started to get up at one point and come sit by me, but Christopher stopped him with a firm hand on his shoulder. "Stay in your seat, son," he commanded, and Jacob obeyed, though tears were forming in his eyes. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a chair or a dinner seating arrangement. This was about erasing me from my own family. This was about replacing me with someone Christopher deemed more valuable, more worthy of respect and attention. Patricia had money and social connections and all the things I'd never been able to provide, because I was too busy working 3 jobs just to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. And somehow, in Christopher's twisted logic, that made her more deserving of the place I'd earned through decades of sacrifice and unconditional love. The realization hit me like a freight train, but it also crystallized something inside me. I sat through the rest of that dinner in silence, but my mind was racing faster than it ever had before. I watched every interaction, noted every dismissive glance, cataloged every moment of disrespect, and I made a decision that would change all of our lives forever. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what really matters, and sometimes the people who take you for granted need to learn what life looks like without you. I was about to teach my son the most expensive lesson he'd ever receive, and it was going to cost him everything he thought he couldn't live without. When dessert was finally served, I excused myself to use the bathroom. "Don't let me interrupt your conversation," I said sweetly, though nobody even looked up from Patricia's story about her recent trip to the Hamptons. I walked down the hallway to the guest bathroom, closed the door, and pulled out my phone with hands that were surprisingly steady considering the storm raging inside me. The first call I made was to my attorney, James Mitchell, who'd handled my affairs since I'd started my own business 15 years ago. Yes, I had my own business, a small but successful medical consulting firm that Christopher seemed to forget about whenever it suited him. "James, it's Nicole. I'm sorry to call you on Christmas, but I need you to draft some documents first thing tomorrow morning," I said, keeping my voice low but firm. There was a pause on the other end as James processed the urgency in my tone. "What kind of documents are we talking about, Nicole?" he asked carefully. I took a deep breath and spoke the words I'd never thought I'd have to say. "I want to transfer the title of Christopher's house back into my name. The down payment gift I gave them was actually structured as a loan in the original paperwork, remember? I want to call that loan due immediately." James let out a low whistle. "Nicole, that's $50,000 plus the agreed-upon interest. Are you absolutely certain about this?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, at the woman who'd spent her entire adult life putting everyone else first, and I saw someone I barely recognized anymore. Someone tired, someone taken for granted, someone who'd finally had enough. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," I replied. "I also want you to review the financial support I've been providing them and draft termination notices for everything." The second call was to my accountant, Richard Chen, who'd been managing my business finances for a decade. "Richard, I need a complete audit of every dollar I've given to Christopher and Amanda over the past 5 years. Every loan, every gift, every payment I've made on their behalf. I want documentation of everything," I instructed, my voice growing stronger with each word. Richard was silent for a moment before responding. "Nicole, that's going to be a substantial amount. Are you planning legal action?" he asked cautiously. I smiled grimly at my reflection in the mirror, finally seeing clearly what I should have seen years ago. I'm planning to stop being a doormat, I said simply. Christopher has a car that I co-signed the loan for, correct? And I've been paying their health insurance premiums through my business plan. I want all of that documented and terminated effective immediately. Richard agreed to have everything ready by tomorrow afternoon. The third call was the most satisfying one I'd make that night. I dialed the number of Margaret Foster, the CEO of Morrison Real Estate Development, Patricia's own company. Margaret and I had served together on a hospital board for years, and she owed me a favor after I'd helped her mother navigate a complex medical situation last year. Margaret, it's Nicole Patterson. I hope I'm not interrupting your holiday, I said warmly, though my heart was pounding with what I was about to do. Margaret's friendly voice came through the phone immediately. Nicole, not at all. What can I do for you? She asked. I chose my words carefully, knowing this conversation could have massive implications. I'm calling because I think you should know that Patricia Morrison has been talking quite openly tonight about some questionable business practices at your company. Tax irregularities and unreported income from property flips. Just thought you'd want to be aware since you're the CEO and ultimately responsible. The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. Patricia said what exactly? Margaret asked, her voice suddenly sharp and professional. I proceeded to relay several things Patricia had bragged about during dinner, things that might have seemed like innocent boasting to most people, but that I recognized as potentially serious legal issues. She seemed quite proud of these shortcuts, as she called them, I added. I just thought someone in leadership should know, given the potential liability for the company. Margaret thanked me for the information and promised to look into it immediately. I could hear the wheels turning in her head, and I knew Patricia's position at that company was about to become very uncomfortable. When I returned to the dining room, they were opening presents. Patricia was holding court while my grandchildren opened gifts she'd brought, expensive electronic devices that made my carefully chosen books and educational toys look pathetic by comparison. Christopher was beaming at his mother-in-law like she'd hung the moon. Amanda was taking photos for social media, probably captioning them something like blessed family time. None of them noticed I'd been gone for nearly 20 minutes making calls that would dismantle their comfortable little world. And that was fine with me because the best revenge is always the one nobody sees coming. I'm not feeling well, I announced, gathering my coat from the closet. I think I'm going to head home. Christopher barely glanced up from the expensive watch Patricia had just given him. Okay, Mom, drive safe, he said dismissively, already turning his attention back to his mother-in-law. Amanda didn't even say goodbye. Patricia smiled at me with barely concealed triumph, but Emma jumped up from her spot on the floor and ran to hug me. Grandma, please don't go, she whispered, tears streaming down her young face. I love you. I held my granddaughter tight, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo and memorizing the feeling of her small arms around my waist. I love you too, sweetheart. So very much, I whispered back. Remember that no matter what happens, okay? Your grandmother loves you more than anything in this world. Jacob joined the hug, and for just a moment, I let myself feel the pain of what was coming. Because what I was about to do wouldn't just affect Christopher and Amanda, it would ripple through the entire family. But they'd forced my hand, and sometimes you have to make the hard choices to teach the lessons that matter most. I drove home through the snowy Portland streets with tears finally streaming down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of anger, of betrayal, of a mother's heart breaking into pieces that might never fit back together quite right. But underneath all that pain was something else, something harder and colder. A determination to show my son that respect isn't optional, that family means something, and that you can't treat the people who love you like garbage without consequences. The city lights blurred through my tears as I made one final call from my car, this one to my best friend Susan Harper, who was a journalist for the Portland Tribune. Susan, remember that human interest story you've been wanting to do about family dynamics and elder respect? I said, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. Susan had been pitching a series about how adult children treat their aging parents, particularly single mothers who'd sacrificed everything. I think I have your lead story, I continued. But I need you to wait until after tomorrow to run it. I want all my legal ducks in a row first. Susan agreed immediately, sensing this was going to be something big. I gave her the broad strokes of what had happened, knowing she'd craft it into something powerful. By the time I pulled into my driveway, it was nearly midnight. My house felt empty and quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of Christopher's place. But it was mine, paid off with money I'd earned through hard work and smart investments. Nobody could take it from me or tell me where to sit in my own home. I made myself a cup of tea and sat down at my kitchen table with a notepad, making a list of everything I'd done for Christopher over the years. The numbers were staggering when I really added them up, and I'd been keeping receipts because that's just how I was raised. $50,000 for the house down payment structured as a zero-interest loan in the paperwork. $32,000 co-signing his car loan and making payments when he fell behind. $18,000 in health insurance premiums I'd covered through my business. $15,000 for Amanda's emergency medical bills 2 years ago. $23,000 in childcare costs I'd covered while they got on their feet. Countless other gifts, dinners, vacations, and expenses I'd never thought to track because you don't keep score with family. Except apparently you should, because family doesn't always have your back the way you have theirs. The total came to over $160,000 in direct financial support, not counting the thousands of hours of free babysitting and emotional labor. I'd essentially funded their entire comfortable lifestyle while working myself to exhaustion. And my payment for all of that sacrifice had been humiliation at Christmas dinner and a folding chair at the end of the table. Well, tomorrow morning, Christopher was going to learn a very expensive lesson about gratitude. I went to bed that night with a clear conscience and slept better than I had in months, because sometimes doing the right thing means doing the hard thing. Christmas morning dawned cold and bright, and I was up at 6 o'clock sharp despite having barely 4 hours of sleep. My phone was already buzzing with messages, but none from Christopher or Amanda, of course. Why would they check on me after I'd left their dinner feeling sick? Why would they care that I'd driven home alone on icy roads? Why would they wonder if their treatment of me had been cruel and unnecessary? The answer was simple. They wouldn't and didn't. But that was about to change in ways they couldn't possibly imagine. At 8 o'clock in the morning, James Mitchell called to confirm that all the legal documents were prepared and ready for my signature. Nicole, I have to ask one more time. Are you absolutely certain you want to proceed with this? He said, his voice gentle but serious. Once these documents are filed, there's no easy way to undo them. You'll be calling in a $50,000 loan, terminating financial support, and potentially destroying your relationship with your son. I thought about that folding chair. I thought about Patricia's smug smile. I thought about Christopher's cold eyes and dismissive tone. I thought about years of being taken for granted while I gave and gave and gave until there was almost nothing left. File everything, I said firmly. And make sure the documents are delivered by courier directly to Christopher today. I want him to receive them while he's still basking in the glow of Patricia's expensive gifts. James agreed and promised the courier would arrive before noon. The second confirmation came from Richard Chen, with a detailed accounting of every dollar I'd provided to Christopher over the years. The spreadsheet he sent was 37 pages long. I've highlighted everything that's legally recoverable, Richard explained. The house loan is airtight. You structured it properly. The car loan you can exit as co-signer with 30 days' notice, which will likely cause the bank to call the full amount due since Christopher's credit alone won't support it. What about the health insurance? I asked, scanning through the numbers that represented years of my hard work. Richard's response was immediate. You're well within your rights to remove them from your business plan during the next enrollment period, which actually opens in January. But I can send termination notice today that it will happen in 30 days. Perfect. I wanted Christopher to have exactly enough time to panic, but not enough time to easily fix everything. The third call was from Margaret Foster, and her voice was ice cold with professional fury. Nicole, I wanted to thank you for bringing those matters to my attention. We've launched an immediate internal investigation into Patricia's activities. She paused, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. I also wanted to inform you, confidentially, that Patricia Morrison has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of that investigation. Several of the issues you mentioned are indeed serious compliance violations, Margaret continued. My heart beat faster, but not with guilt. Patricia had done this to herself with her arrogance and her assumption that rules didn't apply to people like her. I appreciate you letting me know, I replied carefully. I simply felt it was the right thing to do given the potential liability for your company. Margaret thanked me again and ended the call, leaving me with the satisfaction of knowing Patricia's perfect life was about to get very complicated. At 11:30 in the morning, my phone rang with an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, suspecting who it might be. Sure enough, Christopher's panicked voice filled my inbox moments later. Mom, I just got served with some legal documents. What the hell is going on? You're calling in the house loan. You're terminating the car cosign. This has to be a mistake, right? Call me back immediately. His voice had that edge of panic I'd never heard before, and part of me, the mother part that had spent 34 years protecting him from every hardship, wanted to call back and fix it. But the stronger part, the part that had been disrespected and humiliated, knew this was necessary. The second voicemail came 10 minutes later. Mom, seriously, you need to call me. Amanda is freaking out. We can't pay off the house loan, you know that. And without you on the car loan, the bank is going to repossess it. What are you doing? Is this because of last night? I was just trying to make Amanda happy. You know how important her mother is to her. Just trying to make Amanda happy. Like my feelings didn't matter at all. Like decades of love and sacrifice were worthless compared to impressing a woman who'd never shown me anything but contempt. The third voicemail was from Amanda herself, and her voice was shrill with barely controlled hysteria. Nicole, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is insane. You're going to destroy your grandchildren's home over a seating arrangement at dinner. Christopher told me you were upset, but this is beyond petty. How can you do this to Emma and Jacob? What kind of grandmother are you? What kind of grandmother am I? The words echoed in my head as rage built in my chest like a volcano about to erupt. I was the kind of grandmother who'd given up everything for her family. I was the kind who'd worked 3 jobs so Christopher could have opportunities. I was the kind who'd funded their entire lifestyle while being treated like an inconvenient obligation. That's what kind of grandmother I was. The fourth call came from an actual number I recognized, Patricia Morrison's cell phone. I answered this one because I wanted to hear what she had to say. Nicole, I don't know what you think you've accomplished, but spreading malicious lies about me to my CEO is actionable, Patricia said, her voice dripping with venom and barely suppressed panic. I smiled, settling back in my chair with my tea. Patricia, I didn't spread any lies. I simply repeated things you yourself said at dinner last night. If those things constitute violations of company policy or legal regulations, well, that's on you, not me. The silence on the other end was delicious. You vindictive old woman, Patricia finally hissed. You're trying to destroy my career because your son finally realized I'm a better influence on his family than you are? I laughed. Actually laughed, because the absurdity of her statement was almost too much. Patricia, I didn't destroy anything. You did that yourself with your arrogance and your illegal business practices. I just made sure the right people knew about it. And as for being a better influence, let's see how influential you are when you're unemployed and under investigation. I hung up before she could respond, and the satisfaction was sweeter than I'd imagined it would be. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, Christopher showed up at my house unannounced. I watched through the window as he got out of his car, that expensive vehicle I'd helped him buy, and stomped through the snow to my front door. His face was red with anger and something else. Fear. Real fear that his comfortable life was crumbling beneath his feet. He pounded on the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Mom, open up. We need to talk about this, he shouted. I took my time walking to the door, letting him wait in the cold the way he'd made me feel cold and unwelcome in his home. When I finally opened the door, I didn't invite him in. I just stood there in my doorway, looking at this man who was technically my son, but felt like a stranger. What do you want, Christopher? I asked calmly. He pushed past me into the house, his anger overriding any basic courtesy. What do I want? I want to know why you're trying to destroy my life over a stupid dinner seating arrangement, he yelled, his face inches from mine. I stepped back, maintaining my composure even though my heart was racing. This isn't about a seating arrangement, Christopher. This is about respect. He laughed bitterly, running his hands through his hair in frustration. Respect. You're calling in a $50,000 loan because I asked you to sit somewhere else. That's insane, Mom. That's not normal behavior. His words stung, but I stood my ground. You didn't ask me, Christopher. You told me to get out of my seat so Patricia could have it. You treated me like I was nothing. Like all the years I spent raising you alone meant nothing. Like all the money I've given you was just expected and not appreciated. I kept my voice level, refusing to let him see how much his dismissal had hurt me. Christopher's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something that might have been guilt before defensiveness took over again. So, this is punishment then. You're punishing me like I'm still a child, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. I shook my head slowly. No, Christopher. I'm treating you like an adult. Adults face consequences for their actions. You made a choice yesterday to prioritize Patricia's comfort over your own mother's dignity. Now I'm making a choice to stop subsidizing a lifestyle for someone who clearly doesn't value my presence in their life. The words hung between us like a wall neither of us could breach. Mom, please, Christopher said, and for the first time I heard actual desperation in his voice. We'll lose the house. The bank is already calling about the car. Amanda is talking about moving in with her parents if we can't figure this out. The kids are confused and scared. You're destroying our family. I felt tears prick at my eyes but refused to let them fall. I'm not destroying anything, Christopher. You did that yesterday when you chose to humiliate me in front of everyone. I'm simply removing my financial support from people who don't respect me. If your marriage and your lifestyle can't survive without my money, maybe that's something you need to examine." Christopher stared at me like he was seeing a stranger, and maybe he was. Maybe he'd never really known the woman I was beneath the sacrificing mother role I'd played for so long. "This isn't you, Mom. You've never been vindictive or cruel," he said, shaking his head. "You're acting like a completely different person." I smiled sadly at that observation. "No, Christopher. This is me finally standing up for myself after years of being taken for granted. The difference is, you're not used to me having boundaries or expecting anything in return for everything I give." He tried a different approach then, the one that had always worked when he was younger. "I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. It was wrong of me to make you move seats. I should have talked to Amanda about it beforehand. Can we please just fix this and move on?" His apology was hollow, focused entirely on the consequences he was facing, rather than the pain he'd caused. I could hear it in his voice, in the way he rushed through the words like they were just obstacles between him and getting his money back. "Tell me something, Christopher," I said quietly. "If I forgive you right now and tear up these documents, what changes?" He looked confused by the question. "What do you mean, what changes?" "Things go back to normal," he replied. And there it was, the fundamental problem laid bare. "That's exactly my point," I said. "You want things to go back to normal, which means you continue to take my money while treating me like an afterthought. You continue to put Patricia and Amanda's comfort above your own mother. You continue to teach Emma and Jacob that it's acceptable to disrespect the people who sacrifice everything for you. That's not a solution, Christopher. That's just hitting the pause button until you disrespect me again." The color drained from his face as he realized I wasn't going to budge. "So what do you want from me then?" "Blood. Do you want me to grovel and beg?" "Fine, I'm begging you, Mom. Please don't destroy everything I've built." His words revealed so much about how he saw the situation. He'd built nothing. I'd funded it. But in his mind, my money was just a resource he was entitled to, not a gift given from love. "I want you to understand what you did," I said firmly. "I want you to feel a fraction of the humiliation I felt sitting at that folding chair while Patricia took my place. I want you to learn that actions have consequences." Christopher's face hardened then, the vulnerable moment passing as quickly as it had come. "Fine. You want to play it this way? We'll play it this way. But don't expect to see your grandchildren anymore. Amanda won't allow it, and honestly, neither will I. You're choosing money over family, and that's something Emma and Jacob need to understand about you." The threat hit its mark, and he saw me flinch. "You would keep my grandchildren from me because I won't let you take advantage of me anymore?" I asked, my voice breaking despite my efforts to stay strong. "That's who you've become. That's who you've made me become." Christopher shot back, pointing his finger at me accusingly. "You started this, Mom. You fired the first shot. Don't act surprised when there's return fire." He turned toward the door, his body language radiating anger and betrayal. "When you're ready to be reasonable and remember what family actually means, you know where to find us. Until then, stay away from my house and my children." The door slammed behind him so hard that a picture frame fell off my wall and shattered on the floor. I stood there in the sudden silence, staring at the broken glass and wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. But then I remembered the look on Patricia's face when she'd taken my seat. I remembered Amanda's refusal to defend me. I remembered Christopher's cold eyes telling me to get out like I was nothing. And I knew, deep in my bones, that I'd done the right thing, even if it cost me everything. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices, even when it breaks your heart to watch. My phone buzzed with a text message from Susan Harper. "Story is ready to run tomorrow. Title is When Success Forgets Sacrifice. One Mother's Christmas Heartbreak. Are you sure you want me to publish it?" I thought about Emma and Jacob, about how they'd cried when I left last night. I thought about all the future Christmases I might miss, all the birthdays and soccer games and school plays. I thought about what it would cost me to take this public, to air our family's dirty laundry for everyone to see. But I also thought about all the other mothers out there who were being taken for granted by ungrateful children, all the parents who'd sacrificed everything only to be treated like burdens when they got older. All the people who needed to hear that it was okay to stand up for themselves even against their own family. "Publish it," I texted back. "The world needs to know that respect isn't optional, even in families, especially in families." Susan sent back a thumbs-up emoji and told me the story would run in tomorrow's morning edition and online tonight. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for the fallout I knew was coming. I made copies of all the financial documents, all the text messages and emails that showed years of one-sided support. I organized everything into a folder labeled "The Cost of Being Taken for Granted" and filed it away carefully. If Christopher wanted a war, I'd make sure I had all the ammunition I needed. That evening, as I sat alone in my house eating leftover Christmas cookies, my phone exploded with notifications. Susan's article had gone live early, and it was spreading across social media like wildfire. People were sharing it with comments like, "This broke my heart," and "Every parent who sacrificed everything needs to read this," and finally someone standing up for themselves. Within 2 hours, the article had been shared over 15,000 times. Within 4 hours, it was trending on Twitter. And within 6 hours, news outlets across the country were picking it up and running their own versions of the story. My phone rang constantly with interview requests, messages of support from complete strangers, and invitations to appear on talk shows to discuss elder care and family dynamics. But mixed in with all that support were furious messages from Christopher, Amanda, and Patricia. "You've humiliated us publicly," Amanda texted. "Everyone knows this story is about us. My friends are calling asking what happened. You've destroyed our reputation in this community." Patricia's message was more threatening. "My lawyers will be in touch. You've committed libel and slander, and I'll sue you for everything you have." Christopher's message was the shortest and most painful. "I have no mother anymore. You're dead to me." I read that last message over and over until the words blurred together. "You're dead to me." 4 words that ended a relationship that had been my entire world for 34 years. 4 words that severed the bond I'd thought was unbreakable. 4 words that hurt worse than anything else that had happened. But underneath the pain was something else. A strange sense of freedom. Because if I was dead to him anyway, I had nothing left to lose. And that meant I could finally live for myself instead of constantly sacrificing for people who didn't appreciate it. The next morning, December 27th, I woke to find myself at the center of a national conversation about family dynamics and respect. Good Morning America wanted me on their show. The Today Show had called 3 times. Dr. Phil's producers had left 2 voicemails. But it wasn't the media attention that mattered to me. It was the thousands of messages from other parents who'd experienced similar treatment from their adult children. "Thank you for speaking up," one woman wrote. "My daughter hasn't invited me to Christmas in 5 years, and I thought I was wrong to feel hurt. Your story helped me see I deserve better." Another message came from a father in Texas. "I paid for my son's entire medical school education, and now he's too busy to return my calls. Reading your article made me realize I've been enabling his disrespect. I'm making changes today." The messages kept coming, hundreds and then thousands of them, each one a story of sacrifice unappreciated and love taken for granted. I realized that what had happened to me wasn't unique at all. It was an epidemic of adult children who'd forgotten what their parents had done for them, who'd become so focused on their own lives that they'd stopped seeing their parents as people with feelings and needs. On December 28th, 3 days after the Christmas dinner that changed everything, I received an unexpected visitor. Emma, my 12-year-old granddaughter, showed up at my door alone. She'd apparently walked the 2 miles from her house in the cold, her face red and tear-stained. "Grandma," she sobbed, throwing herself into my arms. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about what Dad did. It was wrong and mean, and I told him so." I held her tight, breathing in her familiar scent and feeling my heart crack wide open. "Oh, sweetheart, this isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. Dad says you're trying to destroy our family," Emma said, pulling back to look at me with those wise eyes that had always seemed too old for her face. "He says you're being selfish and vindictive, but I read the article online, Grandma. I read what you wrote about all the things you did for us. All the money you gave us that I didn't even know about. Why didn't you ever tell us?" I led her to the couch and wrapped a blanket around her shivering shoulders. "Because that's not what love does, Emma. When you love someone, you don't keep score. You don't make them feel indebted. You just give, because making them happy makes you happy." Emma wiped her tears with the back of her hand, looking more grown-up than any 12-year-old should have to be. "But Dad kept score," she said quietly. "That's why he got so mad when you took back the money. He was counting on it." The observation from my granddaughter was so perceptive, it made my chest ache. "Yes, honey. Your dad got comfortable with my support and forgot to be grateful for it. That's human nature sometimes. We stop appreciating what we have when it becomes routine." Emma nodded slowly, processing this information with a maturity that impressed me even through my pain. "Mom and Dad are fighting all the time now," Emma admitted, picking at the edge of the blanket. "Mom wants to move in with Grandma Patricia, but Dad says no because he's too proud. They got a notice from the bank about the house, and Dad threw it across the room. He broke Mom's favorite vase. She looked up at me with frightened eyes. Are they going to get divorced, Grandma? Is this all happening because of what Dad did to you? I chose my words carefully, knowing how important they would be to this child who was watching her world crumble. Emma, your parents' marriage issues are not your fault, and they're not really my fault either. What happens in a marriage depends on how two people treat each other and communicate with each other, I explained gently. If your parents are having problems, it's because they need to work on their relationship. What I did was simply stop enabling behavior that was hurtful to me. I removed my financial support because I deserved to be treated with respect. The consequences of that are not my responsibility. They're your father's responsibility for building a life he couldn't afford without my help. Emma absorbed this, her young mind working through complex adult concepts. So you're not coming back? She asked, her voice small and scared. Not unless things change significantly, I said honestly. Emma, I love you and your brother more than anything in this world. But I can't keep sacrificing my own dignity and self-respect to maintain relationships with people who don't value me. Does that make sense? She nodded, tears streaming down her face again. I value you, Grandma. I love you so much, and I don't want to lose you because of what Dad did. I pulled her close, letting her cry against my shoulder while my own tears finally fell. You're not going to lose me, sweetheart. I promise you that. We'll figure out a way to see each other. After Emma left, promising to text me every day, I sat alone with my thoughts and the weight of what I'd done. Part of me wondered if I'd overreacted, if I'd let my hurt pride push me into actions I'd regret. But then I remembered sitting in that folding chair, watching Patricia take my place, feeling invisible and worthless. I remembered Christopher's cold dismissal and Amanda's indifference. I remembered years of being taken for granted while I gave and gave and gave. And I knew, deep in my soul, that I'd done what needed to be done. On December 30th, the situation took an unexpected turn. I received a call from Margaret Foster again, and her voice carried a mix of professional courtesy and something that sounded like respect. Nicole, I wanted to update you on the investigation into Patricia Morrison, she began. We've discovered irregularities that go far beyond what you initially reported. Patricia has been operating what essentially amounts to a parallel business using company resources. She's been flipping properties under her personal name using company time, company connections, and insider information about upcoming developments. The implications of what Margaret was saying slowly sank in. How serious are we talking? I asked. Though I suspected, I already knew the answer. Margaret's response confirmed my suspicions. Serious enough that we've had to report it to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Patricia could face criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. She's been terminated effective immediately, and we're pursuing legal action to recover funds. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Patricia had brought this on herself with her arrogance and illegal activities, but it also meant more chaos for my granddaughter's home life. There's more, Margaret continued. Patricia has been threatening legal action against multiple people, including you and several colleagues here. But our legal team has advised her that she has absolutely no case, and any lawsuit she files would likely result in additional criminal exposure. She's essentially powerless right now. That evening, I received a message from an unknown number. This is Amanda. We need to talk. Can I come by tomorrow morning? I stared at the message for a long time, debating whether I wanted to hear whatever she had to say. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let them all stew in the consequences of their choices. But another part, the part that still loved my son despite everything, wanted to at least hear them out. 10 o'clock, I texted back, and come alone. The next morning, Amanda arrived exactly on time. She looked terrible, her eyes red and puffy, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing sweatpants and an oversized jacket. This wasn't the polished, put-together woman who'd hosted Christmas dinner. This was someone who'd been crying for days and barely sleeping. Thank you for seeing me, Amanda said quietly as I let her inside. She stood awkwardly in my living room, wringing her hands like a nervous teenager. I didn't know what else to do. Christopher refuses to admit he did anything wrong, and everything is falling apart. I gestured for her to sit, but I didn't offer her coffee or tea. I wasn't ready to play hostess to someone who'd stood by silently while I was humiliated. Why are you here, Amanda? I asked directly. She took a shaky breath before responding. Because you were right. About everything. Christopher has been taking you for granted for years, and I enabled it because it benefited me. The truth is, we've been living way above our means, and your financial support was the only thing keeping us afloat. Without it, everything's crashing down, and I can see now how wrong that was. Amanda wiped tears from her eyes, her hands shaking as she tried to compose herself. My mother is facing criminal charges. Did you know that? She asked, though it wasn't really an accusatory question, more like a statement of fact. She's being investigated for fraud and embezzlement. Her entire career is over. She's talking about having to sell her house to pay for legal fees. Everything she built is gone, and part of me wonders if you somehow planned all of this. I met her eyes steadily, refusing to feel guilty for Patricia's own illegal actions. I didn't plan anything, Amanda. I simply reported what I heard. Patricia chose to brag about illegal activities at a family dinner. She chose to cut corners and break the law. She chose to build her success on fraud. Those were all her choices, not mine, I said firmly. Amanda nodded slowly, accepting this truth even though it clearly hurt. Christopher is in denial about everything. He keeps saying you'll come around, that you're just trying to teach him a lesson and you'll forgive him soon. He doesn't understand that he actually destroyed something that can't be fixed by saying sorry. She looked around my house, at the photos of Christopher and the grandchildren that still lined my walls. Can it be fixed, Nicole? Is there any way to undo this? I thought carefully about her question, about what forgiveness would actually look like in this situation. Amanda, fixing this isn't about me writing checks again. It's about Christopher fundamentally changing how he views our relationship. It's about him understanding that I'm a person with feelings, not just an ATM machine with unconditional love. It's about him valuing my presence in his life because of who I am, not what I can provide. I paused, letting those words sink in before continuing. Can you honestly tell me that Christopher has reached that understanding? Or is he just panicking because the money stopped? The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. He's panicking, Amanda admitted quietly. He's angry and scared and lashing out at everyone. He's been sending you horrible messages that I tried to stop him from sending. He told Emma she couldn't see you anymore, and she's been crying in her room for 3 days. Jacob asked me yesterday if Grandma Nicole stopped loving us because Daddy was mean to her. We're destroying our children's sense of security, and I don't know how to fix it. Tears streamed down her face as the full weight of the situation seemed to crash over her. I'm so sorry, Nicole. I should have defended you that night. Yes, you should have. I agreed, not sugarcoating the truth. But you didn't because it was easier to go along with Christopher and keep your mother happy. You chose their approval over doing the right thing. Now you're all facing the consequences of that choice. Amanda nodded, accepting the harsh reality of my words. What can I do to make this right? Please tell me what I can do, she begged. I considered her question carefully, knowing that what I said next would determine the future of our relationship. You can start by being honest with Christopher about how his behavior has affected everyone. You can stop enabling his entitlement and his refusal to take responsibility. I continued. You can acknowledge to Emma and Jacob that what happened was wrong and that adults sometimes make terrible mistakes. You can work on building a life that doesn't depend on my financial support so that our relationship, if we rebuild one, is based on love and respect rather than need. And you can understand that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it definitely doesn't mean everything goes back to how it was. Amanda listened to every word, nodding slowly. Will you at least see the kids? They miss you so much, and they shouldn't be punished for what Christopher and I did. I'll see Emma and Jacob whenever they want to visit me here, I said firmly. But I won't be coming to your house for family dinners or holidays unless Christopher genuinely apologizes and demonstrates through his actions that he understands what he did wrong. And that's not negotiable, Amanda. I'm 65 years old and I'm done sacrificing my dignity for the comfort of others. Amanda stood to leave, her shoulders slumped in defeat, but also perhaps in acceptance. I understand. Thank you for at least listening to me. I know you didn't have to do that. As she reached the door, she turned back one more time. For what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. After Amanda left, I spent the afternoon responding to the hundreds of messages still pouring in from the viral article. One message in particular caught my attention. It was from a woman named Catherine Davies who ran a nonprofit organization supporting elderly parents dealing with family estrangement. Your story has opened up a national conversation that desperately needed to happen. Catherine wrote, Would you be willing to speak at our conference in March? We have over 2,000 attendees who would benefit from hearing your perspective on setting boundaries with adult children. I found myself saying yes, committing to turning my painful experience into something that might help others. Over the next few days, life settled into a new kind of normal. Emma and Jacob came to visit every afternoon after school, walking the 2 miles because Christopher still refused to drive them. We did homework together, baked cookies, and talked about their feelings about everything that had happened. I was careful never to badmouth their father, but I also didn't pretend that what he'd done was acceptable. Your dad loves you very much, I told them repeatedly. But right now he's struggling with some grown-up problems that he needs to work through. That doesn't change how much I love you, and it doesn't mean our relationship has to suffer. On January 5th, 2 weeks after the Christmas dinner that changed everything, I received a letter in the mail. The return address was Christopher's house, but the handwriting on the envelope was his. I stared at it for a long time before finally opening it with trembling hands. Inside was a single page, handwritten in the messy scrawl I recognized from years of school notes and birthday cards. Mom, it began. I don't know how to write this letter because I don't know if there are words that can fix what I broke, but Emma told me you said adults need to take responsibility for their mistakes, so I'm trying. The letter continued for 2 full pages, single-spaced. Christopher wrote about growing up without a father and how he'd always felt pressure to succeed to make my sacrifices worth it. He wrote about how somewhere along the way, he'd started measuring his worth by his material success and status. He wrote about how Patricia's wealth and connections had made him feel important and validated in a way he'd been chasing his whole life. And he wrote about how he'd taken me for granted because I was always there, always supportive, and he'd foolishly assumed I always would be no matter how he treated me. What I did at Christmas dinner was unforgivable, he wrote. I treated you like you were worthless when you're actually the most valuable person in my life. Christopher's letter continued. I prioritized impressing a woman who's now facing criminal charges over honoring the mother who sacrificed everything for me. I taught my children that it's okay to disrespect the people who love you most. And I destroyed something precious because I was too blind and arrogant to see what I had until it was gone. He went on to detail the consequences he was now facing. They were losing the house and moving into a small rental apartment. Amanda had gone back to work full-time. They'd sold one of their cars and were sharing the other. Christopher had taken a second job on weekends to cover their expenses. Patricia was no longer speaking to any of them, too consumed with her own legal troubles. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty or to ask for money, Christopher wrote. I'm telling you because I need you to know that I understand now. I understand what it means to struggle and sacrifice. I understand what you gave up for me. And I understand that I threw all of that back in your face because I was too caught up in my own ego to appreciate it. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I needed you to know that I'm sorry, truly sorry, and that I'm working every day to become the kind of man you raised me to be. The letter concluded. The kind of man who values character over status, who honors his mother instead of humiliating her, who teaches his children about respect and gratitude. I failed at all of those things, but I'm trying to do better. I love you, Mom. I never stopped loving you, even when I was too stupid to show it. Your son, Christopher. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. It was everything I'd wanted to hear, but words were just words until they were backed up by consistent action. Over the following weeks, Christopher proved through his actions that the letter was genuine. He drove Emma and Jacob to visit me every weekend. He called to check on me without asking for anything in return. He sent me articles about things he knew I'd find interesting. He invited me to Jacob's basketball game without any expectation that I'd come, but with obvious joy when I did. Slowly, carefully, like 2 people learning to trust each other again after a betrayal, we began rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't the same as it had been before, and it never would be. But in some ways, it was better because it was built on mutual respect rather than one-sided sacrifice. On Easter Sunday, 4 months after that terrible Christmas dinner, I sat at Christopher's new dining table in their modest rental apartment. The table was smaller, the apartment was cramped, and there were no expensive decorations or catered meals. But Emma and Jacob were laughing, Amanda was smiling, and Christopher looked at me with genuine appreciation in his eyes. Mom, would you like to sit here? He asked, gesturing to the chair at his right side, the place of honor at the table. I looked at that chair, at my son's hopeful face, at my grandchildren watching us carefully, and I nodded. Yes, Christopher, I'd like that very much. As I sat down in that chair, the chair I'd earned through decades of love and sacrifice, I felt something shift inside me. The pain of that Christmas night would never completely disappear, but it had transformed into something else. A reminder of my own worth, a testament to the importance of self-respect, and a lesson that love without boundaries isn't really love at all. Christopher and I both learned something valuable through this experience. He learned that you can't build a life on other people's sacrifices without showing gratitude and respect. And I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their actions. The viral article that exposed our family drama ended up helping thousands of other parents find their voice and set boundaries with ungrateful adult children. I received messages every single day from people thanking me for speaking up, for showing them that it's okay to demand respect even from family. My relationship with Christopher will always carry the scars of what happened, but those scars remind us both of how far we've come and how much we've grown. Emma and Jacob learned a powerful lesson about respect and consequences that will serve them for the rest of their lives. And me, I learned that I'm stronger than I ever thought possible. If this story touched your heart or made you think about your own family relationships, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with someone you love? How did it turn out? Share your experience because your story might help someone else who's struggling with a similar situation. And if you found value in Nicole's journey, please share this video with someone who might need to hear this message. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories about real-life challenges and the courage it takes to overcome them. Remember, you teach people how to treat you, and sometimes loving yourself means standing up for yourself even when it's hard. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.